Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel Race Gaming. Racing is one of the oldest competitive activities enjoyed by humankind throughout the ages. From the Hoplitodromos foot races of ancient Greece and the chariot races of Egyptian royalty, to the first Daytona Beach NASCAR race in 1949, competing with others over speed and control has always been a part of human competition. When the thrill of racing paired with electronic gaming, it was like a match made on Tinder. A modern happily ever after. Beginning with mechanical racing games with upright cabinets, like the Indy 500 racing game from Japan, which was later released as Speedway in the United States and Canada in 1969, these fast-paced flyer arcade games inspired the founder of Atari to create one of the first racing games for home platforms. In 1973, Atari released the game Space Race, second only to Magnavox's silent home console racing game, Wipeout, a simple electronic dot that players moved around a racetrack. Atari's arcade race game, Space Race, pitted two players against each other using joysticks to maneuver spaceships around obstacles on a black and white screen. A year later Atari released the first racing game with cars, Grand Track 10. Then, in 1982, the first racing game by today's definition of video games launched into arcades and changed history. Pole Position by Namco, later licensed by Atari in the US, was an early racing game that would be recognizable by today's gamers because it was based on a real-life circuit with Formula One racing cars competing against computer-generated cars on the Fuji Speedway of Japan. This early racing game became the most popular video game in arcades during the early to mid-1980s, and inspired a Saturday morning cartoon and a sequel arcade game, Pole Position 2. The game was graphically advanced compared to its closest competitor, Rally X by Namco, which was popular partly because it was the first racing game to include background music. Pole Position was controlled with a steering wheel and provided an authentic driving feel that was unmatched at that point in time. Racing games through ages. Early competitors in home gaming consoles included the Magnavox Odyssey and Atari's Pong. Coleco's Telstar was also an early contender, but was only met with mild success. Because arcade patrons were already very familiar with the successful Pole Position racing game, it soon bypassed the competition for fans of the best racing games in their home consoles. Atari's early successful racing games included Pole Position, Grand Prix, Enduro, Night Driver, and Street Racer, all popular on the Atari 2600 home gaming console. Sega soon became another contender for the top choice in home gaming systems with several successful racing games for the Sega Genesis in the late 1980s, including Super Monaco GP. However, it wasn't until Nintendo released its first gaming console that Atari first glimpsed some serious competition coming over the horizon, and the race was on. Nintendo released several popular early racing games including Rad Racer in 1987, RC Pro-Am in 1988, and Days of Thunder in 1990. Today's best racing games offer thrill rides of realism in driving simulation racing games, fun and fantasy in arcade-style racing games, and action-packed kart racers. Futuristic racing games with sci-fi vehicles of all types are also growing in popularity among gamers. Incredibly popular racing game franchises like Forza, Need for Speed, and Grand Theft Auto top the list of immersive and challenging racing games. These games offer stunning open-world environments, car collecting and modification, iconic racetracks, and realistic graphics, audio, controls, and effects. Gamers can enjoy the unmatched exhilaration of high speeds from the safety of their own sofas with any of the three most popular gaming platforms today. From the best Xbox One racing games to PlayStation favorites and new Nintendo Switch games, the latest racing games are the next best thing to being behind the actual wheel of a race car. Racing games offer some advantages to new drivers and continue the legacy that the early arcade games began, but with a realism that would have stunned and enchanted an early gamer back in the golden era of arcades. So, it's time to start your engines and enjoy. About a decade ago, racing games seemed to be a genre on their way out. Arcade racers like Blur and Split Second weren't selling, great studios were closing, and even mainstream series like Need for Speed were struggling to get the attention they once had. Outside of a Mario Kart or a Gran Turismo, it seemed the days of the big-ticket racing game, and of the genre as an exciting mass-market draw, were over. Happily for racing fans, things now look much better. Forza Horizon made driving games cool again, Indie studios have resurrected the joys of the 90s style arcade racer. The PC simulation racing scene is more competitive than it's ever been, and Codemasters has ridden a successful stint on the Formula One license all the way to an incredible $1.2 billion acquisition by EA, which shows just how highly racing games are valued now. Here we present our picks of the best racing games to play right now, mostly modern, because this is a genre that tends to improve with technology, but with a classic or two that has stood the test of time thrown in. As usual, we're focusing on games that are easy to find and play on current hardware. To break things up a bit, we've divided out list 4 sub-genres. Open-world racing games that combine racing and exploration over a large map. Arcade racing games which are all about immediacy and fun, and less about realism. Motorsport games based on licensed real-world sports, and sim racing games which concentrate on the authenticity of the driving experience. It started out as a spin-off from the Forza Motorsport circuit racing series, but Forza Horizon has now become the main event. A beautiful, uplifting series of racing